Hello and welcome everyone to the Legal Lens, where we dissect legal cases and concepts that shape our society today. I'm your host Krish, and today's episode dives into something that's not just a legal issue, but also deeply rooted in our cultural fabric. Trigger warning: the concept of rape culture in India. We'll be specifically examining the tragic and eye opening case of Bhanwari Devi, a social worker whose fight for justice exposed the institutional failures that perpetuate rape culture, especially when a caste role plays. But before we jump into the case, let me introduce my wonderful co hosts. We have two legal powerhouses with us today, Ranbir and Praj, who will be bringing the sharp insights to the table, and of course, the brilliant Amara, a retired judge with a wealth of experience and wisdom. Together, we'll unpack how caste, violence, and institutions intertwine to form a vicious cycle in India, particularly in the case of Bhanwari Devi. We've got a lot to cover, including a debate about whether the media should be held accountable for reinforcing rape culture. Trust me, this is going to be an enlightening discussion. So sit tight as we unravel the layers of rape culture in India. But first, Ranbir, why don't you break down the concept of rape culture for our listeners?
Thanks, Krish. Let's start with the basics. The term rape culture refers to the environment in which rape is normalized and excused in society. It's not just about the act of sexual violence itself, it's about how society, law enforcement, and even the media handle these crimes. It's a system where victim blaming is rampant and perpetrators often walk without facing serious consequences. In India, the situation becomes even more complicated due to the intersection of patriarchy and caste. Pratiksha Bakshi, in her piece Rape Cultures in India, delves deeply into how these two forces combine to maintain a structure where certain bodies, particularly those of Dalit women, are seen as available, expendable, and undeserving of justice. Rape culture thrives because institutional failures allow it to. Think about it. When the police delay filing a report or the courts blame the survivor for provoking the crime, they're upholding this culture. What's even more alarming is how caste dynamics factor into this. In India, sexual violence often functions as a way to reassert caste dominance. For example, upper caste men can commit sexual violence against Dalit women with relative impunity because they believe the law and the society will shield them. And sadly, they're often right. The system is rigged in the favor of the powerful. It's like this unspoken social contract that says, as long as you belong to the right caste, your actions, no matter how violent or dehumanizing, would be excused. It's incredibly insidious. And that's the core of rape culture in India. It's not just about individual actions, it's about a collective failure to hold the powerful accountable, particularly when gender and caste are involved.
Ranveer is right, and Bakshi's article lays it out clearly. Victim blaming is a massive part of rape culture, and in India, it's amplified by caste dynamics. Think about how, in so many cases, the first question isn't why did the perpetrator commit this crime, but rather, what was the victim doing? Or why was she there? It's as if women's bodies, and especially Dalit women's bodies, are inherently suspect. And this is where the intersectionality of caste and gender comes into sharp focus. Dalit women are doubly marginalized. They're already seen as lower because of their caste, and then as women, their bodies are policed and exploited in ways that upper caste women might not experience. The structures meant to protect them, the police, the courts, and even community leaders, fail them. In fact, these structures often work to protect the reputation of the upper caste perpetrators. This isn't just a failure of law, it's a societal failure. The system is designed to protect the powerful while marginalizing the vulnerable. And this plays out tragically in cases like Bhanwari Devi.
Let's bring this discussion into focus with the case of Bhanwari Devi, which tragically illustrates exactly what Ranbir and Praj have been talking about. In 1992, Bhanwari Devi was working as a Sathan under a government program aimed at stopping child marriages in a village in Rajasthan. Because of her work, she angered some powerful men from the Gujar community, an upper caste group in the village. They decided to punish her for daring to challenge their customs. The story begins. On September 22nd, 1992, 5 men from this upper caste group raped Bhanwari Devi in front of her husband. This wasn't just an act of sexual violence, it was a deliberate assertion of caste dominance. The message was clear. How dare a Dalit woman, a low caste person, challenge us? The assault wasn't just a crime of opportunity, it was an attempt to reinforce the social hierarchy. Now, what happened is a tragic yet telling example of institutional failure. When Bhanwari Devi reported the assault, The police didn't take her seriously. They delayed the investigation, and when they did conduct a medical examination, it was botched. The examination was delayed for 52 hours, and a crucial evidence was lost. And that wasn't the worst of it. When the case finally went into court, the judge ruled that the upper caste men couldn't have raped her because they were too respectable, and that men of that caste wouldn't even touch a Dalit woman due to caste differences. This judgment was a shocking reflection of how deep seated caste biases are within the institutions meant to deliver justice. Instead of recognizing the attack for what it was, an attack of caste based and gendered violence, the court used caste privilege to absolve the perpetrators. It's an example of how the system doesn't just fail Dalit women, it actively works against them.
Exactly, Amara. What we see here is rape culture and caste suppression working hand in hand. Bakshi's analysis is clear. Caste isn't just a background factor in cases like Bhanwari Devi's, it's central. Bhanwari wasn't just a woman who was raped, she was a Dalit woman, and that Dalit identity played a huge role in how she was treated by the police, the courts, and the community. The court's ruling basically sent a message that Dalit women's bodies are somehow less worthy of protection. This reflects a larger societal attitude where women violence against lower caste women is normalized, even expected. And when legal institutions, whether they're legal, social, or media, reinforce these hierarchies, it becomes nearly impossible for survivors like Bhanwari to get justice.
Let's not forget the role the media played in all of this. I've looked back at some of the news coverage from that time, and instead of highlighting the systematic failure or this caste based violence, a lot of the headlines focused on how Bhanwari's activism provoked the attack. It's almost as if they were saying, well, she was stopping child marriages, so she should have known this would happen. How insane is that? This goes back to Baksi's point about rape culture being normalized through institutions, and the media is no exception. Instead of focusing on justice for the victim, the media narrative often shifts to the questions like, what was she doing? Or why was she there? Completely ignoring the power dynamics at play. It's as though the media, rather than being a neutral party, actually becomes a part of the problem by reinforcing these caste based power structures. Alright, we are going to stir things up with a little debate here. Should the media be held accountable for its role in reinforcing rape culture? Or are they just the messengers reporting the news? Ranbir, let's start with you.
Look, the media plays a crucial role in shaping public perception, and when they fail to report accurately or responsibly, they're absolutely part of the problem. In the Bhanwari Devi case, the media's victim blaming narrative was deeply harmful. They framed her as someone who asked for it because she was disrupting societal norms by opposing child marriages. That's not journalism, it's perpetuating rape culture. And yes, they should be held accountable.
I partly agree with Ranbir, but I'd argue that the media also reflects the society it's a part of. The journalists and editors who write these stories are part of the same culture we're criticizing. So while the media should be held accountable, we also need broader societal reform to change these attitudes at the root. You can't blame the media without addressing the larger cultural norms that influence them.
The media is a double edged sword. On one hand, they're expected to be neutral, on the other, they're influenced by prejudices and biases of society. Holding them accountable is important, but we need more education and ethical training in journalism, especially when it comes to sensitive issues like gender and caste.
Well, that's all we have time for today. We've unpacked a lot: the concept of rape culture, the Bhanwari Devi case, and the role of media in reinforcing harmful narratives. The key takeaway here is that rape culture in India is deeply intertwined with caste and institutional failure. And unless we address these root causes, survivors like Bhanwari will continue to be denied justice. Thanks again to Ranbir, Praj, and Amara for their incredible insights. If you found this discussion valuable, share this episode and let us know your thoughts. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay safe.